Aloha and welcome to segment 11 of our Adobe Premiere tutorial. We're going to start working in effects now. Visual and audio effects, mainly visual, but we'll do a little bit of both. To get started in effects, there's a couple of things that we need to explore. The biggest thing we need to take a look at is the Effect Control tab in the Preview panel. So in the top left panel up here, right, this is where all of our previews have been. Like if I double click something, right, we get video, and if I double click an audio track, we get a waveform in there. But what I'm interested in is not that default tab, but the second one over, the one that says Effect Controls. So I'm going to click on that. And right now it's empty because I don't have anything selected on the timeline. So let's come take a look at this clip. And I am going to select it, single click it to make sure it's selected. So that actually happened for me when I moved over to the timeline. And you'll notice as soon as it was selected, all kinds of things appeared over here in this Effect Control tab. If I deselect it, right, if I select an empty space or if I select nothing, there's nothing in that tab. But as soon as I click on an actual clip, I get all kinds of things. Now, these are grouped into categories. So I'm going to collapse these little arrows here just so we can see the categories better. You see there's a category, there's an entire section of video that has a motion category, an opacity category, and a time remapping category. And then there are two categories each for audio channel 1 and audio channel 2 that have the volume and the pan control. These effects are inherent in every clip. So we haven't added a special effect to this yet. We haven't put anything on there. But just because it exists as video, it has these effects that can be adjusted. Just because it exists as audio, it has these effects that can be adjusted. So let's start with the motion. That's where I get most of the work done anyway. I'll just click this little down arrow so you can see what's going on here. We can play with our position. We can play with our scale. We can play with our rotation. And then these other anchor point and anti-flicker. So let's just start with scale, because I think that's probably the most fun to start with anyway. You'll notice right now that my scale is set to 100%. That means that the video is as large on the screen as it was when it was shot. Now I can click that number 100% and type a new value in, like 50%, and watch what happens in the program window in the top right-hand corner where we can see Scott. See, he's now half as large as he was a second ago. If I point the mouse at that number 50%, you'll see that the icon changes. It becomes a mouse finger with a little left and right arrow. That tells me if I click and drag left and right, I can resize it dynamically. On scale, if I hit that little down arrow beside it, I get a little slider that appears. This isn't there on all of them, but I can zoom in and out at least some on this one as well. Or if I click the word scale so that it's highlighted, you'll notice that a bounding box appeared on my video over here. So I can actually grab the corner and resize it this way. And if you look in the Effect Control tab, you'll see that that number is changing and that slider is changing as I'm dragging back and forth. The other thing that we can play with is position. That's where this is on the screen. So right now, these are XY coordinates, and this is an X value of 360 and a Y value of 240. Because this video is standard definition, the overall pixel dimensions are 720 by 480. So the original image was 720 pixels wide, which means that the timeline sequence is 720 pixels wide. The center of that is half of 720, or 360. Standard definition video is 480 pixels tall, which means my sequence is 480 pixels tall. Half of 480 is 240, so the middle of the screen, 360 and 240, are the XY coordinates for standard definition video right in the middle of the screen. Just like before, I can click these numbers and drag. So I'm changing my X value right now by clicking and dragging that number. Or I can grab the Y value up and down. I could click and type a number in there. If I want to put it back in the middle, I could type 360 And if I wanted to put it in the back in the middle vertically, I can type 240. Or if that position is selected, I can click and drag and move it around in the window with my mouse, including moving it completely off screen if I wanted to. And if you watch in the Effects tab as I'm moving this around, again, you'll see that those XY values are changing as I'm moving it. Rotation does what you think it does. It's going to rotate the image. I have a little graphic underneath here that I can open. That gives me kind of a visual representation. But again, I have a number here. So right now it's set at 0 degrees. If I click and drag that number left to right, I can rotate it that way. Or I could totally click on that number and I could rotate it, let's say 45 degrees. There we go, it's exactly 45 degrees. And again, as long as that position is highlighted, if I come over with the mouse and I get close to the corner, not on the corner, if I get on the corner, that changes the scale. But if I get close to the corner, you see that the icon turns into this sort of rotatey thing. So I can actually click and rotate it. So I can move this thing around wherever I want to on the screen. I can make it whatever size I want. I can make it larger than it was originally, smaller than it was originally. I can rotate it. I can reposition it. This one, anchor point. Now again, we have coordinate values of 364, 20. So at the moment, the anchor point is in the middle of the original video. And in fact, if you look closely, I hope you can see it, there's a little circle crosshair right there in the middle of that video. That is my anchor point. Now, if I click right on top of it, you can see that my cursor changes. I can reposition that anchor point by clicking and dragging. So now I'm going to move it on top of that cupboard door. It shows up a little bit better, right? The little blue icon on top of the white cupboard. I can also move it the same way I did position by changing the X and Y values here in the Effect Control tab. But what this will do is now that I've moved the anchor point, if I rotate it, rather than spinning around the middle, it spins around that point. And I can even move the anchor point outside of the video itself. All right, so now if I go to rotate it, it spins around that point in space. All of these have resets next to them. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to reset my anchor point. I'm going to reset my rotation. I'm going to reset my scale. And I'm going to reset my position. So I've put everything back where it goes. There's another one here, anti-flicker filter. If you're having issues, if you've pointed your camera at another screen and you're getting a flicker as a result of it, or if you're shooting under LED lights and you're getting a flicker, playing with this value might help. Might. All right, let me close the motion tab up, the motion opacity. Let me open this one up, click that little down arrow. Now again, I have a numeric scale here that I can click and drag in. And this goes from 0 to 100, and it just makes the item more or less transparent. If you look on the timeline, you see that horizontal line that appeared when we made the video track taller? This actually controls, at the moment, transparency. So I can click and drag that line up and down if I want to make something partially transparent. Or likewise, I can click and change the opacity here. Blend mode does some interesting stuff, but I'm not going to show you that at this moment. Time remapping, we're going to skip right over that. Come back to it in another video. And then here we have audio effects, volume and pan. So let's go take a look at this last clip, for example. Let's pretend that I had changed the volume on this clip by clicking and dragging those two horizontal lines. If I come over here to the Effect Control tabs and open that window up, what you'll see is that I can now see that level is minus 10.1 decibels on audio 1 and minus 15 decibels on audio 2. If I wanted to put it back to 0, I can sit here and click and drag with the mouse and try my darndest to get it back to 0. And I can get close. I can get to 0.3. And the same thing on the second one. I can get close, negative 0.3, but I can't quite get it exactly to 0. It's frustrating. oh, wait a minute, I can come over here to the Effect Control tab, click on that value, and type in 0. And now I have reset that volume so that's actually at 0. So this is a little bit more precise way of accomplishing that same thing. Okay, let's look at the place where this could be used in conjunction with more than one video clip. So here I've got a piece of B-roll. Let me zoom in.
Even on this dark roast, we can see there's still a nice sheen on there.
Maybe I don't want that piece of B-roll to be full screen. Maybe I want it to be a picture-in-picture so that it appears in the top left-hand corner, but we can still see Scott. So I'm going to put my playhead there where I'm looking at the piece of B-roll. And then this is the important step. Don't forget this. I'm going to single click on it so that I've got the correct clip selected. Then I'm going to open up my motion effect. I'm going to scale that bad boy down. And then I'm going to, using my X and Y sliders, move it up there into the top corner. Maybe it should be a little bit bigger. All right, let's play that and see what we get.
On this dark roast, we can see there's still a nice sheen on there.
All right, I have created a picture-in-picture effect. That's pretty cool, isn't it? This motion tab, I get a lot of use out of the motion effects. The opacity tab I also get a fair bit of use out of. Let me show you what that could be good with. Now, in this particular place, if I click on my single click on that piece of B-roll, I don't really want, let me open opacity up here. I don't really want to make the whole thing transparent, right? Because then I'm just seeing through it and it doesn't do its job very well. But also here under opacity, notice that I can create a mask. I can draw an ellipse, or I can draw a square, or using this pen, I can hand draw curves. Let's not worry about that one so much yet. But if I grab this ellipse tool, it's a little bit hard to tell because this is shrunk down. Let me go back and reset my scale and my position. All right. So if I turn that mask off, we're back to a full screen of B-roll. Okay. So when I hit that oval button, it created this oval-shaped mask. And now I can click on these handles and resize it. And what I'm going to go for, I'm going to try to more or less, I'm not going to get it exactly, but I'm going to try to more or less match just the opening of the coffee container there. And I can actually, if I click other places, I can actually add and subtract. Right. So now I've basically cut that out. And that's what, if I turn off the opacity, the little FX button beside the label, so if I hit the little FX button beside opacity, it'll turn the opacity off. Right, so I can't see that effect anymore. But now I'm going to take that bad boy and scale it down and use my X and Y coordinates to move it up there into the corner of the screen. And let's take a look at that.
Well, even on this dark roast, we can see there's still a nice sheen on there. We know.
All right. So between the opacity and the motion, you can kind of crop a video a little bit, and you can reposition it, resize it, rotate it, move it elsewhere on the screen. So if you wanted to do something like Hollywood Squares or the Brady Bunch, where you had 9 people on the screen at the same time, 9 different faces, or like a Zoom meeting, if you wanted to duplicate a Zoom meeting, you could take, a series of videos that you had shot separately. Using the motion effect, you could scale them all down and position them on the screen so they looked like a Zoom meeting. Much higher quality than a Zoom recording would be. That's the first little bit of working with effects. That's understanding what's hiding in the Effect Control tab there in the top left pane, and seeing what the controls are you can play with. The trick with this is always to make sure that you put your playhead on top of the clip that you want to make changes to, and remember to single click that clip, select that clip, because otherwise you might be making changes to a clip that you're not looking at, and that's just frustrating. You don't discover it until later on and pull your hair out and nail and gnash your teeth and all that sort of stuff. All right, familiarize yourself with this, and then in our next video we're going to take effects a little bit further. We're going to actually start adding special effects to video rather than just playing with these handful of effects that are inherent in the video itself.